Hello, everyone. Welcome to How to Advocate for Yourself, a journey from self-like to self-love. I am your global communication skills coach, Monique Russell, and I lead an international communication skills firm called Clear Communication Solutions here in the Atlanta area. Just a little bit about me. I have been teaching since the age of 2. I always tell people with the age of 2 with my dolls, really. But in front of a live audience, I have been speaking since the age of 8 years old. I have a Bachelor of Science in Broadcast Journalism, 2 Masters of Science in Public Relations and Advertising. I'm a certified disc coach. I'm a life coach. I've been a subject matter expert for a university and a professor for 7 years. My client list includes many wonderful organizations and great people, including world-class clients like Amazon, Google, CDC, Salesforce, and the world's busiest airport, Atlanta Jackson Hartsfield International. I absolutely love what I do. And because of my ability to effectively communicate and my ability to actually advocate for myself, I've been able to share the stage with some of the world's most respected and requested speakers, like Lisa Nichols, mentoring from Les Brown, having private invitations to events with celebrities. And I don't say this to impress you, but I say this to impress upon you that your ability to effectively communicate, to articulate your message with clarity, and to advocate for yourself is one of the most essential necessity skills that you need in order to thrive and survive in today's society. Over the course of the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about several critical elements. And these elements focus on aspects of interpersonal communication as well as intrapersonal communication. The interpersonal, this is where we're focused on how we're connecting and how we're communicating with other people, our peers, our family members, our friends, our partners. The intrapersonal is on the inside, how we get along with ourselves, how we see ourselves. And these are the aspects together and combined that make up the elements for us to be advocates for ourselves, to speak up when we need to do so, and to express what we need and what we want without feeling guilty. These are the critical elements that will help us to bring inner peace, inner fulfillment, and clarity. If you look at the screen, you're going to see myself in a beautiful traditional African attire. And that's because I'm partly Nigerian. I grew up in the beautiful Bahama Islands, and I live here in the United States of America, and my father is Nigerian. I am also an entrepreneur. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a sibling, as some people are only child. And so much more encompasses my aspects of intersectionality and my layers of identity. But if you took a look at me with the naked eye, you would not be able to see all these aspects of my identity. Take a look at this screen. You're going to see an iceberg, and this picture depicts so clearly the many aspects of ourselves, the many aspects of who we are, and our layers of identity. On the top of the iceberg, we can see some things that we can make assumptions about. You might see traditional dress, you might see my gender, you might see me, listen to me playing music, you might see me posting as a business professional. There are many things that you can assume and see on the surface level, but the things that you can't see in my identity, the things that you will not have a visible access or information to, these are the aspects of ourselves. These are the areas of our lives where we tend to have the most influence. We make our decisions from. Our beliefs in our religion, the way we view leadership, hierarchy, and authority, our education, our familial class, whether we're parents or not. There's so many aspects of our identity that hide beneath the layer of the surface. And my intention for you today is to be able to explore the many beautiful aspects of your identity and learn how to not allow one to overpower or overshadow who you are. Now, how does our identity form? There are so many documents and research and articles that talk about what happens up until the age of 8 years old. So when we get to 8 years old, who we are, our personality is shaped, our identity is a bit shaped at that time. It's kind of scary, right? At 8 years old, so young, to have so many things already shaped and formed for us. But what influences that? What influences that is basically the way we were raised, our environments, our personal experiences, our cultural influences. All of these things come into play in terms of how it shapes our identity, how we tend to see ourselves. The challenge is that as we're moving on into adulthood, some parts of our lives, some aspects of our identity tend to overpower and overshadow each other. Let me give you an example. So one of my colleagues, and I'm going to call him Nick, just for the case of this example, he's a biology scientist, and he's had many accolades, many awards. He's very well known and influential, but each time we would speak, or each time he'd speak to anyone in our circle, he'd often refer to himself as a scientist, which he is. But he would say something like, okay, as a scientist, I think we need to focus on examining how we change the mindset of people in the older generation. Or as a scientist, I think that, it's really easy to see the breakdown where people get stuck with their goals. As a scientist, I really don't think ketchup should go with mayonnaise, whatever it is. He would often always preface his responses with his identity from what it is that he did for his career or as a living. And many times I see people get caught up into using their work or their profession and career as an overarching aspect of who they are, tending to overpower and overshadow so much that if anything rocks or shakes that identity, they see themselves as a failure. It impacts how they look at themselves in a negative way because they're not able to answer the question, if I'm not a scientist, then who am I? Who am I if I'm not a parent? Who am I? Where's my value? If that part of my identity that overpowers who I am, where does my self-worth and value go? So the thing about it is, one of the times I had a conversation with him and I said, Nick, I want you to respond without saying as a scientist, because it's overpowering and it's overshadowing who you are. You have to begin to get used to seeing yourself outside of what you do. And this even showed up in his parenting. And of course, it would be jokes and jovial, but hey, as a scientist, my kids do X, Y, Z. No, the kids of a scientist, we're a family of scientists. It's great to have pride in what you do and who you are. My main point is that this is not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I want you to take away the important point from this is that accessing and expressing other aspects of your identity and who you are is a great way for you to develop self-regard, self-love, and compassion. I've seen this also play out in people who allow their faith or their religion, spirituality practice to overpower and overshadow their identity. Then when things don't go the way that they intend to, or when they don't feel as though they're living up to their full expectation of what the identity they see themselves as requires, they feel like a failure. They feel like they're not measuring up. They're not able to actually advocate for themselves. So you see how this all falls into play, how we see ourselves, the identity we choose to express, the amount of power and control we allow one aspect of our identity to have. If it's not monitored, if it's not put in check, it can also cause us to have negative impact and negative outlook on ourselves. But what we're looking for is a self-love, a compassionate approach, a more positive outlook about who we are. Do you like yourself or do you love yourself? This is a question that I ask students in my workshops. We have workshops on emotional intelligence. If I'm talking about intentional motherhood, you'll see a copy of my book on the screen, or even in my coaching practice, some variation of this question comes up. Do you like yourself or do you love yourself? Think about that for a moment. Now, many people tend to respond that, you know what, I love myself. But when we actually dive deep into the behaviors of what self-like and self-love can look like, we notice that they're referring more of to self-like. Maybe when you answered the question, you might find which category you fall into, but let me explain. So we're talking about positive self-regard. Positive self-regard is the overall way in which we see ourselves. It's the way we feel about ourselves. It's our ability to embrace all aspects of who we are, our strengths and our weaknesses. When we're able to see yourself in a positive way, you are able to advocate for what you need and what you want. You say yes and no without feeling guilty. You're able to embrace all aspects of yourself. You take on assignments and projects, even if you haven't done it before, because you have developed self-trust. So some examples of what I say self-like. I hear people say things like, yeah, I love myself, but I hear them say, I'm so stupid. Oh my God, if I had better sense, I wouldn't have done that. I'm so fat, in a joking way. But when you get to that place of self-love, we can examine from our language. We can look at the way we speak about ourselves, the way we describe ourselves to others, the way we refer to ourselves, and we begin to remove those self-deprecating language, even if it's in jest. Self-like is, taking care of your externals. We care about our bodies. We care about getting our hair done. We care about getting our nails done, facials, going on vacation, taking time for self-care. But here's the thing with those activities, they're external. But if you feel like you're doing those things and inside of yourself, you feel like, you're being taken advantage of, or that nobody understands you, or that you have to tolerate unhealthy relationships because you just want to stay connected and you want to be liked, or you're blaming others for your lot in life, for where you are right now. You're blaming your childhood, you're blaming your parents and saying that, maybe that they are responsible for where you are. You would have been further in life right now. Now, we're not negating conditions and circumstances that allow others to accelerate and that allow others to take a slower time or a slower pace or not even be able to compete. We're not denying systems of oppression that exist in the world. What we're referring to is when we move to that aspect of self-love, the difference is very, very striking. How you tend to see yourself, how you tend to see others, how you tend to view things that have happened to you, whether they were in your control or not, and the things that you are now accessing that are in your control. We tend to see behaviors that follow. When you're in self-love, you're able to set an intention for your life and actively pursue it. You're not waiting for somebody to give you a goal and for someone to say, hey, this is what you need to do. Because you are so aware of who you are, your identities, what you want. Knowing what you want is a really strong aspect of self-love. You're going to resist the urge to fix people. This is what happens when you're exercising self-love. You're going to take ownership for everything in your life. Those things that were out of your control, of course, you can't go back and change them. But what you can do now is look at that and see how you can use that and propel. What was the lesson? What did you need to learn out of that? You're able to share your emotions, good and bad. A lot of times people are able to happily share how they're feeling, if they're feeling in a positive state, if they're feeling excited. But when you are exercising self-love, you are able to share the good and you are able to share the bad. If you find yourself mainly in a state of self-like, and you want to move from self-like to self-love, I want to tell you right now, it's never too late. It is never too late. The best time to start is now. And the first place to start is with forgiveness. Forgiveness involves the act of releasing hurt and shame for whatever you feel has held you back, whatever part you've played in it. It involves activating self-compassion, and you can take a journal. I love to journal. There's something really powerful with writing out your feeling, seeing it in the physical form. You can take a journal and you can start with the prompt that you see on the screen. I forgive you for. I forgive you for. I forgive you for allowing people to take advantage of you. I forgive you for not speaking up. I forgive you for feeling like a failure. I forgive you for feeling that your world revolves around being married, having kids, having a big brand and a big career. I forgive you. You begin to activate self-compassion. With self-compassion comes self-regard. With self-regard, that's the aspect of self-love. When we're practicing self-love, we're expressing what we need and what we want. We're advocating for ourselves without feeling guilty, without feeling obligated, without making decisions just on a whim. Whatever you feel ashamed of, whatever you feel disappointed in with yourself, begin to forgive yourself. Activate that process. You see, self-love is like a garden. A garden withers when it's not watered. Look at this picture on the screen. Look at how dry and shriveled up and stale and pale and gray those flowers are. Self-love is like a garden. It needs water. It needs sunlight. It needs to be pruned. Dead ends need to cut away. It needs attention. Self-love, on the contrary, it's not gray. It's not dry. It's not shriveled up. It's not stale. It's not struggling. It's not pale. It's that flourishing garden. It's that flourishing activity. It's that aspect of coming into alignment with who you really are. So when you are thinking about nutrients, when you're thinking about sunlight, when you're thinking about pruning, when you're thinking about all the things that can help you to become stronger in your self-advocacy, self-forgiveness is where you start. Compassion is what you add to the mix of ingredients. Setting healthy boundaries, speaking up for what you want and need, and building a very supportive community. I want to remind you, it's never too late to start. If you find your self in a place where you say, you know what, for the longest time, I can't remember when I actually exercised self-love. It's okay. Or you might say, well, you know what, I'm good. I'm exercising self-love. It may not be as consistent as I want to do it. And that's where I ask the question, how well am I doing that? How well am I exercising self-forgiveness? How well am I exercising compassion? How well am I asking for what I want? Or am I just being silent? Am I going along to get along? Am I saying and feeling things on the inside, but I'm not expressing it? A lot of times when we don't express what it is that we want and need, sometimes it's because we just don't know how to say it. So having prepared scripts, having prepared statements is one way to actually put into practice the aspect of advocating for yourself. Learning about people that do it, watching from others that do it. All of this is a part of your toolkit. And guess what? The best time to start, you got it, is now. So I want you to think about where you have learned what you do. Think about what you do and where you have learned what you do. What do you do when conflict arises? What do you do when you feel uncomfortable? Do you normally lean in? Do you normally wait for a few days? Do you normally avoid it altogether? Do you excuse it away or find justifications or say, what's the bother? What do you normally do? And where did you learn to do that? Who taught you how to love yourself? Where'd you observe that from? Who did you observe growing up, in your family maybe, or not? Who did you observe speaking up for themselves? Who would you want to model in your family or not? Maybe even now. Where did you learn to do what you currently do when it comes to advocating for yourself? Maybe you were taught culturally that you should be quiet. Your work should speak for itself. Cultural influences also impact the way we respond to situations. And that's why this exercise is so important. Because if we don't know why we do what we do or where we got it from, we're going to simply repeat the same patterns of the past. So take that time to learn more. Take that time to dive deep so that you can begin to build a stronger future for yourself. Everything starts with an intention, and it's never too late to start. If you intend to strengthen the ability to advocate for yourself, it has to start with you. There's no magic trick. There's no magic pill. Nobody's going to come to you and give you all the answers. You're going to have to decide. It's going to have to start with you. When you begin to start developing this aspect of strength, self-love, guess what is going to be strengthened? Your boundaries, your parameters that you begin to put in place for how you choose to live your life. Boundaries are your best friend. They allow us to focus on what gets in and what stays out. A lot of times people say, you know, boundaries, it feels so rigid. It feels so, But you're giving permission, you're giving control, you are allowing, and it is a mutual process. Boundaries help you to live the best life that you want to live. Imagine if you're going to a fast food restaurant or you're sitting in a restaurant and it's time for you to order your food. And you know that you are allergic to shellfish. That's a boundary. If you eat that food, of course, naturally, you're going to have an allergic reaction. And of course, that will probably make it easier for you to say, sorry, I can't eat that, I'm allergic. Right? Because you know that the consequence of what will happen when you eat it, it will be harmful for you. But sometimes we don't realize how harmful it is when we allow other aspects of our boundaries to be overridden. We don't realize the harm that we're causing emotionally, psychologically to ourselves. And so having those scripts, the same way that you say, hey, I can't eat that, I'm sorry, I'm allergic. If someone's asking and encroaching on your time and your overcapacity, I'm sorry, I don't have the capacity right now. I'm sorry, I don't understand what we're discussing. I'm sorry. In fact, you don't even need to say, I'm sorry. You simply need to state what you need and state what you want. A boundary is a limit, it's a border, it's a line. It helps us to live the life we deserve to live. If you're in a medical situation and you need to understand what the procedures are that are happening to you, it can be scary, it can be confusing. I remember that happened to one of my family members, and she was in a medical establishment on her own. And she knew she didn't want to go along with this procedure, but something inside of herself didn't allow her to say anything at all. And later on, we talked about it. And I said, you should have had me come with you in situations like this, especially when you are nervous and you're afraid and you're not really sure about certain things. Having an advocate with you, talking about it ahead of time, is also another way to ensure that your boundaries are honored and respected. And you're going to feel so much more proud of you. So you have greatness within you. You have greatness within you. Self-love and self-advocacy starts with you. No one can actually do it for you. The things that we talk about, the things that we described here in this presentation today, we talked about making sure that you understand the layers of identity, how the identity forms. We talked about making sure that you understand how the identities are shown at the top and the ones that are shown beneath the surface, what aspect they play in us advocating for ourselves. We talked a lot about self-like, and we talked a lot about self-love. We talked about the difference in terms of what happens when we're in like with ourselves versus when we are in love with ourselves. And the biggest thing is about starting to begin this process or strengthen this process with self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness is what activates the compassion, it activates the self-love, it activates the positive self-regard. And with that self-regard, we're now able to advocate for ourselves. We're able to express our needs. We're able to ask for what we want and what we need without feeling guilty, without feeling obligated. Obligation includes our parents, our friends, our boss, our peers, our children. And when we have those things in place, we develop our boundaries. We don't allow others to encroach on our boundaries. We don't respond to ourselves in a way where we set boundaries and we don't honor them. And if we have trouble, we prepare. We prepare by developing scripts. We prepare by thinking through scenarios. What could happen if I am in a scenario where my boundary might be encroached upon me? How will I respond to it? How will I say no without hurting that other person's feeling? How will I ask more questions if I don't understand without feeling negative about myself, without feeling as though, oh, I'm just a bother, I'm bothering someone? That is how we know self-regard and a positive outlook needs strengthening and developing. So when you're able to ask yourself these questions, and you're able to begin that process of self-love, the advocacy always starts with you. I want to thank you so much for listening to this presentation. It is my absolute pleasure and joy to share topics like this because these are topics that I've gone through personally in my own life. Growing up in the beautiful islands of the Bahamas and traveling over to the United States of America as a young girl, having my first child in my teens, getting married, having a business, and finding my way in a new country, in a new environment with new requirements. I had to learn to speak up for myself, but I didn't always do that. I wanted to please others. I wanted to be a people pleaser, and I was. I wanted people to like me. I thought if I said yes, it meant that I was a good person. My faith also influenced that aspect of me as well. Until one day, something happened. I had lost my confidence, and in a moment's notice, I realized it. I had a negative situation in my business happened, and in that moment, I did not speak up. I didn't say a word. I said nothing. My throat was frozen. I was paralyzed. And that's when I realized that my confidence was lost in a slow cooker over time. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't run out and say, you know what, I'm going to run to the store because I lost my confidence. Let me go get some. It's not like NyQuil or Dayquil. But I realized that it happened. And it was in that moment that I decided to find out what other areas in my life was I playing small. What other areas in my life was I going along to get along? What other areas in my life was I willing to just not rock the boat? And let me tell you, there were some other areas. So as I began my own journey of self-discovery, of self-love, of self-forgiveness, of self-awareness, it has empowered me to teach my story, to share my experiences, and to impact women and men all across the globe, helping us to change the way we see ourselves, to break out of those old paradigms, to remove the societal and cultural expectations that make us feel small or cause us to shrink or box us in. Self-advocacy begins with you. It's a very practical, tactical, strategic skill. And you can do it. You can develop it. And if you want support and you need to continue the conversation, if you'd like to invite me for a keynote presentation, a workshop, or coaching, you can always visit my website at www.moniquerussell.com, or you can visit me on LinkedIn, and you can find me at Monique Russell, Clear Communication Coach. You can also call the office line at 706-963-0322. And I thank you once again for joining and watching.